Calcers. All right, so we're going to go through the mini quiz from 5-6, and it is as follows. We have a chart with the functions values and then the derivative values at certain x values, and then we're given certain quantities and equations that we want to find the derivative of. All right, so number one, we've got j of x equals g of x times sine of x. Now, if we want to find j prime of 0, first thing we're going to need to do is find j prime of x, which we're taking the derivative and two things are being multiplied, so we're going to have to use the product rule. So we got u equals g of x, v equals sine of x. So we've got u prime is g prime of x, and then we've got v prime is derivative of sine is cosine of x. So we're going to do u prime v, so we've got g prime of x sine of x plus uv prime g of x cosine of x. And that is what j prime of x is equal to. Okay, so now we want to find what j of 0 is. So all these x's, I'm just going to erase, if my pen will let me. So all these x's I'm going to erase, and I'm going to replace those with 0, because that's what we want to find the function's value at. All right, so g prime of 0 is -3 times sine of 0, the y value at 0 is 0, plus g of 0 is -2 times cosine of 0, that's the x value at 0, which is 1. So we've got j prime of 0 is equal to 0 plus a -2, so j prime of 0 is equal to -2. Final answer. All right, for the next one, I'm going to change my pen color, so we're doing a different pen color. So we want to find the equation of the line tangent. So we want two things when we have an equation of line tangent. We want a point, so I have halvesies of a point. I have the x value, so -1. In order to find the y value, I have to find the y value of h, so I'm going to plug in -1 into h. So h of -1 is equal to 2 times f of -1 times g of -1. So that's going to be 2 f of -1 is 3. 2 times 3 times g of -1 is 1. So h of -1 is equal to 2 times 3 times 1. H of -1 is equal to 6. So it's going to be -1, 6 is my point. Now, the second thing I need for an equation of line tangent is the point, I got it, and the slope. And when we think slope, we think derivative. So I've got to find the derivative. So we've got u is equal to 2f of x. V equals g of x, and the reason why I'm doing that is it's two things being multiplied, so we need the product rule. So, oops, already did my u and v. Now u prime is going to be 2 is a constant, so it stays out in front, times the derivative of f, which is f prime of x. V prime equals the derivative of g of x, which is g prime of x. All right, so u prime v, so we've got 2f prime of x times g of x plus uv prime, 2f of x, g prime of x, and that is what h prime of x is equal to. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to replace all the x's with -1, because that's where I am evaluating it this time. So we're going to fill in -1 for all those values that I want to know. All right, so we've got 2 times f prime of -1. F prime of -1 is -2 times g of -1, which is 1, plus 2 times f of -1, which is 3, times g prime of -1, which is 1. So that's going to equal -4 plus 6. -4 plus 6 is +2, so my slope is +2. So now I have to find the equational line tangent, so y minus 6 equals m, which is 2, x minus a -1, so +1. And that is my equation of the line tangent. Now, just kind of a refresher, guys, if I said the equation of the line normal would be perpendicular, so I would just change that slope to be -1/2. Okay? Alrighty, I'll change my pen color again. There we go. All right, on to the next one. We want to find k prime of 0. So we've got a function divided by a function, so we're going to need to use the quotient rule. So u is the numerator, which is 3x plus cosine x. V is my denominator, which is f of x. So we've got u prime, which is 3 plus the derivative of cosine is negative sign, so I'm going to make that minus sign x, and then v prime is going to be the derivative of f of x, which is f prime of x. All right, so we've got u prime v, so f of x times 3 minus sine x minus uv prime f prime of x times 3x plus cosine x. I'm just putting the monomial out in front, which is the f of x and the f prime of x, instead of putting that binomial in front, over v squared. So f of x squared. Okay, now I'm evaluating it at 0, so I'm going to take all of those x's and I'm going to replace those x's. Everywhere I see an x, I'm going to plug in 0. Okay, so now I evaluate this. So I'm going to scroll up f of 0. F of 0 is -1. So that's going to be a -1 here. And then also a -1 squared on the bottom. All right, 3 minus sine of 0. That's the y value at 0, which is 0. So 3 minus f prime of 0. F prime of 0 is going to be 2 times 3 times 0 is 0 plus the x value at 0, which is 1. So 0 plus 1 is 1. All right, so we've got -3 up top minus 2, so that's -5 over 1 squared is 1. So final answer is k prime of 0 equals -5. Okay, that is my final answer. All right, on to the next one. We've got f of g of x. So I've got a function inside of a function. That is chain rule. So to find the derivative, I'm going to do derivative of the outside, f prime. I keep the inside the same. Then I multiply by the derivative of the inside. And that's what m prime of x is equal to. Now, if I'm trying to find m prime of 0, I'm going to replace all the x's with zeros. All right, so I'm going to do the function inside of a function first. So I'm going to find what is g of 0. So g of 0 is -2. So I'm going to do f prime of -2 times g prime of 0. Okay, so I did the function, evaluating the function inside. Now I'm going to just find these two function values and multiply. F prime of -2, f prime of -2 is -1 times g of prime of 0, g prime of 0 is -3. So -1 times -3 is +3. M prime of 0 equals +3. Final answer. Okay, and on to the last one. Uh-oh, I forgot to put a dx there. Shoot. We'll fill that in right there. That should have a dx. My fault, guys. Rookie mistake there. All right, so now we're doing the integral. Now I've got an inside function. So now when I have an inside function, which is that 2x, if I'm doing the antideriv, I need to do u substitution. So my u is going to equal 2x. So du dx equals 2. Du equals 2 dx. So 1/2 du is equal to dx. So when I substitute in, I'm going to do g prime of u. I replace dx with 1/2 du. And now my bounds are no longer going to be -1 and 0 because those are x values. So they're going to be 2 times -1 is -2. 0 times 2 is 0, so 0 stays the same. And now I have my u substitution done, so I can do my antideriv. So 1/2 is a constant in front, it stays in front. Antideriv of g prime is g of u. And we evaluate that from -2 to 0. So I plug the top bound in, so 1/2 g of 0 minus 1/2 g of -2. So that's going to equal 1/2, I'll do it below, 1/2 g of 0. So g of 0 is g of 0, -2. So 1/2 times -2 minus, and then we do g of -2 is 2, so 1/2 times 2. So I've got -1 minus 1. -2 is my final solution for that one. And that's it. Like this.